here in the room, but also online. Welcome to Dive-In Festival 2024 at Swiss Re here in Zurich. My name is Dana Janssen. I'm the head of HR for Swiss Re here in Switzerland. And it's a pleasure to welcome you all here, of course, today to take part in a conversation on this super important topic, very relevant today, really to talk about generations at work, fit for a sustainable future. So we are in a time where the collaboration across generations is not just important, but is essential for our future. It will be driving innovation, sustainability, and inclusion in our workplace. And with this event today, we look to create the opportunity to reflect on where we stand today, to see what we need to do to go forward, and to make sure as individuals and in the industry, we can ensure that our workplaces are equipped to thrive in the future. We're fortunate to be joined by a panel of colleagues from our peer companies, and I'll introduce them a bit later. They will share their insights on how we can foster better intergenerational collaboration and cooperation, and in doing so, making sure that our industries can remain inclusive and resilient. First, we'll kick off with a keynote speech in which we'll explore today's topic, generations at work. And there'll be time for questions and answers later. And Lorenzo in the back will be facilitating that. People online can submit questions. And also in the room, you can ask questions after Anina is finished. Then we'll proceed with the panel discussion to dive deeper into some of the topics that will come up in the keynote speech. And then, of course, afterwards, we invite you for an apéro in the foyer. So to set the stage for our discussion, we're honored to have with us Professor Dr. Anina Hille. She's a leading expert on social sustainability, demographic trends, and workplace dynamics. Her research sheds light on the experience and values of different generations in Switzerland's workforce. She'll take us through some of that research and the Generation Barometer survey that has been done. She'll go through and highlight some of those things. And it will give us a comprehensive look of where we are today and how we can move forward. Now, I really want to thank you all for coming and joining into this conversation. It's important that this is being prepared for our future. But let's now all start with welcoming Anina to stage. Thank you very much, and we look forward to hearing your speech.
Thank you, Dana, for the kind introduction. And hello, everyone, online and here. I'm really happy to be here. I start with a small hint for Q&A. Lorenzo is actually looking after the Slidos. The ones online, you can ask your questions in there, and at the end of my presentation, I will try to answer them. So, let's start. Topic of today is fit for a sustainable future, generations at work. Anyone in the room knows why I took this picture for sustainability? Any idea? Well, the reason is, for me, sustainability is actually more than green. Most people associate it with environmental issues, right? But actually, it's also about social and governance. And generations at work and a multi-generational workforce, they are an important part of social sustainability. And that's why I like the human and the colors. So just a quick dive into the definition of what is actually sustainable development. A quite broad and common definition is the Brundtland report. And it says sustainable development is development that meets current needs without compromising the ability of future generations to meet their own needs. So you have this intergenerational thought actually in this definition of sustainability. In Germany, maybe you guys know Andreas Inset, a German philosopher. He introduced, among others, the word Enkelfähigkeit, and I think that's quite well showing this intergenerational thought and intergenerational sustainability, where actually age diversity and inclusion is really part of it, and we can manage that actively, these age diverse workforces, with generational management. I will talk later on generational management. Before I do that, I would like to dive in a few demographic backgrounds globally, as well as then with Focus Switzerland, because we're in Switzerland. So let's have a look at our next world. This summer, the UN Population Division, they published new data on their forecast on world population. It's actually by country. I've aggregated these data per continent, and that's what you see here. And that's the overall population. So, of course, one thing, these forecasts always are with uncertainty, right? There are assumptions about immigration, etc. But that's kind of the broad forecast there. And what we see overall, that our world is still growing in population. It's expected, according to this forecast, to grow until the mid-80s of this century, with, I think, peaking at 10.3 billion and then decreasing slightly again. Currently, we're over 8 billion, just to give you a measure. And these numbers are in billion. And what you see, really, the growth comes from Africa. You see the brown bars, they are actually for 2050, the projections, and the yellow bars are for end of this century. So Africa, population growing. Asia as well growing, however, peaking around 2050 and then already decreasing. It's very heterogeneous. The countries beneath it, for example, China is already strongly aging and population is already decreasing. So that's really just an aggregate on continent. In the US, North America, we also have a small growth actually until end of this century. So that is mainly due to immigration and higher fertility rates than we have in Europe, especially of the first generation immigrants. And what is really the scary story is Europe, that really looks different. Europe is actually stagnating in terms of population. It actually already started a little decreasing. You don't see that in these rounded numbers, but it's already decreasing, and it will decrease further until end of this century. Now, what is interesting is that it's actually the workforce or the people in working age, they are already strongly decreasing in Europe. And the continent is getting older, it's aging. So let's now have a look at Switzerland, the demographic development in Switzerland. I show you here data from a different source, not from the UN, but actually from Swiss government, Bundesamt für Statistik. They calculate 3 scenarios. This is the middle one, where they assume quite a moderate immigration of 55,000 net people coming in each year. This is to know. So that's why they differ also sometimes between the UN and the Swiss. So the population up to now did rise in Switzerland steadily. We crossed the 9 million mark, and it's going to rise further around 12% from today. What is really interesting is that different age groups don't grow in the same pace. The 65-plus-year-olds are expected to grow 40%, or even dependent on the scenario, up to 60-70% until 2040. That's huge. And it's like 700,000 to 900,000 more retired people until 2040 in Switzerland. And at the same time, the people in employment age, they don't grow really much. We have 4%, which is on an annual basis like 0.4%, which is almost stagnating, we could say. And actually, dependent if we look at people in that age versus people in the workforce, the case is different. They are already decreasing in Switzerland. Workforce is already decreasing. Or if we just look demographically at it, and just look young ones entering the market and elderly leaving the market, we have already since 2020 a shrinking labor market in Switzerland. So we have a shrinking workforce. At the same time, we have an aging population because these balances change, and the age dependency ratio is going to rise from 33% currently to 44% in 2040. That means in 2040 we're going to have 44 persons 65 plus, as compared to 100 people in working age. And of course, that needs to be supported. And That is a big challenge, but maybe also a chance. So the question arises with this shrinking workforce and also aging in Switzerland. Well, can we actually import talent from our neighbor countries, from the countries we import mostly? And here in brown, you see persons in employment age, since when their countries or continents are shrinking. So in Europe, already since a decade, persons in employment age are shrinking. And our neighbor country, since 2010, people in labor age are shrinking. And Switzerland, dependent on the forecast, I just said it, what exactly you count is already shrinking in workforce or will just start soon shrinking. And when maybe one last hint to that, it's very different across cantons. Like Zurich, for example, will be growing 14%, but other cantons, they're aging much more. So population aging and longevity in Switzerland, I think they have a lot of impact. They have impact on our society. They have impact on client needs. And of course, they also have impact on labor market and working life. And I asked ChatGPT to create a little comic, and that's what it ended up. And I ask you, is actually the future market, labor market, going to be that actually the candidates, the employees, going to choose the employers like in a beauty contest? So maybe something for the panel later to discuss. So I was thinking about it. What do these developments and trend means actually for work life? In terms of careers, maybe they are longer, non-linear careers, more dynamic, flexible paths, such as multi-stage careers. People make several careers, taking breaks for education, for skill building, or also for personal reasons. And what is interesting, intergenerational lifespans with an aging society are also increasing. So I would dare to say the need for care leaves is going to increase, and I'm just going to show you a graphic on that later. Then you have different values of different ages, and you need to manage them actively in the workforce, and that's what generational management, under other things, does. So I think you need a strategy also in terms of that. And a question is also, what's the elderly's role in the workforce? How can we engage them longer in the labor market? And how do we actually finance our longer lives? So let me just show you two last facts on this. This one is actually on the intergenerational lifespans. In gray, you see, on the x-axis, you see buckets of people on their age. So in the middle, you see the 45 to 54-year-olds. So in 1900, in gray, 22% of them still had at least one parent. So a lot of the parents died. Nowadays, 83% are still lucky enough to have one parent. But it also means they take care probably of children, and at the same time, they take care of elderly parents and taking care of them. So that means employees in the future, just due to the fact of aging, need more flexibility, also in terms of care leaves, where parental leave is just one kind of subsample of it, the way I see it. And on longevity, I have you here some numbers, and interesting are the ones in brown. Life expectancy at 60 years for a 60-year-old person currently in Switzerland, for a male is 19 years in healthy years, so healthy life expectancy. For female, it's even more, it's above 20 years, and it's still rising. So we have so much long, positive health years in front of us after actually what we say, okay, maybe now it's time to retire. And actually, Switzerland is global leader in healthy years life expectancy. So that's the good news. And what does it mean? It means that maybe our perception of basically what elderly is needs to be rethought. For me, it's a social construct which is made up over the past maybe 150 years, a narrative where people after working life were tired, were weak, had to be taken care of. But if you look at these numbers, people in this age, on average, of course it's heterogeneous, still have a lot of healthy life in front of them and want to be active. So why not actually do flexible retirement and allow for careers after 65? And I've here just an example, maybe some of you know it, the Villages. That's a huge retirement city in Florida. And there kind of the elderly are really segregated, and that's for me the old view of age. They are taken care of, but maybe we can integrate them much more in the future actually in social life. So question to you, a little indiscreet one. For the ones in the room, please hold up your sheet. Who feels actually younger than their biological age? Many, and across generations. Oh, we have one young generation, okay. But many green ones are the Gen X, okay. But I think we have anyway many. Who feels older than their biological age? 1, 2, and they are Generation Y, millennials, okay. And who feels the same? Okay, quite a few. Okay, that's actually, by research we did, it's actually confirmed. So we asked over 1,000 employees, and as you see, overall, the majority feels younger. Only few feel older than the biological age. And now what's really interesting, the plus 50 ones, they especially feel younger. And now I'm not going to ask you the next question, which will be maybe also indiscreet. Can you imagine working at retirement age? And there again, you see the trend. Okay, there's quite some openness actually of the employees, and it's more openness of the elderly ones, probably also because they're closer to it and can more associate with it. So let's come now to generations at work and generational management. There are currently 4 generations on the Swiss labor market. The biggest one, Generation Y, and then Generation X. And you see Generation Z and baby boomers, they only make even less than 15% of the overall labor market in Switzerland. So we did a study, the Generational Barometer, so thank you for telling that, and I would like to present some results of that. This is based on a tool for employers actually, where they can perform an online site analysis and benchmarking on the topic of generational management, and as well their employees can participate. We launched that tool 2019 with support of the state of Switzerland, and are very proud to have Swiss Re as a sponsor since then for this tool and for the barometer. And we did another survey based on this in 2023, and I'm going to show you some results. And there participated like over 50 large caps in Switzerland, and over 200 small and medium caps, and over 1,000 employees. Just that you know what are the numbers behind. And I'm now going to talk, when I talk about this study, in general, I'm going to talk about older and younger and not about generations, because the empirical research or evidence for very specific, value-specific for generations is kind of mixed. It's not clear if, there are methodological limitations, and there's heterogeneity within a generation, so it's much more correct to speak about older and younger. And we looked for statistical significant differences there. So the employers, they said generational management is more important to them in general, large companies as well as small companies since 2019 that increased that value. And it's really the big majority which says it's more important to them. That's the blue and the green areas. Sorry for that, it's in German, the study, so I don't have that in English. And what is interesting, the benefits, they also see a lot of benefits, actually, the companies, but they differ a bit. Large caps, they see the main benefit in, addressing skill shortage and demographic change, in enhancing employer attractiveness and bringing competitive advantages. While SMEs often having less resources in HR, they rather see the main benefits of preserving the knowledge of older employees and pass it on to younger ones. In summary, companies think it's important and companies see the benefit. So, how is actually the implementation of generational management in Switzerland? And that is not so rosy, unfortunately. Since 2019, very little change, and measures implemented have not changed much and are still at low level. So, for example, what would be very important in intergenerational management is the knowledge transfer and collaboration between generations or between different ages. And most companies say, oh yeah, it's very important also for our business success. However, only, for example, 15% of the large caps said that actually they observe that knowledge transfer between different ages is really happening in their company. And to the contrast of that, the employees said most of them, hey, we are open to take on knowledge from other ages and we're open to give it further. So where does this discrepancy actually come from? Why isn't it working better, this knowledge transfer between generations? And I would like to share two possible reasons, or two reasons suggested actually by the data with you. One is, you don't have to read that in detail, is structural aspects. Employers as well as employees find it relatively unimportant that actually there are structures which help to increase that intergenerational transfer of know-how. So in brown, you see on the left-hand side, we asked actually the employees, you know, what is important to you, what is less important to you, and for example, mixed teams in terms of age were quite unimportant for them. They're on the very low end. And at the same time, employers, we asked what are the measurements you do in generation management. On top is generational mentoring. Second place is building aged mixed teams. However, also there, only 22% said that they really do it. It's zutreffend in German. So it's not much. So on both sides, there seems to be not so much importance given to it. And in my view, age diverse teams are key for the future to handle an aging workforce. Then we come to the next experiment with our audience here. You got your nice cards. And what do you think? And are there prejudices about generations in the workplace? So may I ask firstly that, like the baby boomers, quick hold up all the baby boomers that I see how many of them are here? Okay, not many. Do you think they are prejudices? If yes, please hold up. Okay, 100% disagreeing, okay. Let's do Gen X, the green ones. How many are there of the green ones? Okay, many, you're kind of, yeah, that's like in the labor market, yeah. Are there prejudices? Yeah, also many of them. Huh? Okay, and how is it with Gen Y, the red ones? Oh, many red ones. And who of you thinks there are prejudices in the working market, in the labor market? Also almost all of them, okay. And Gen Z? Okay, there are a few Gen Zers here. And do you think there are prejudices, Gen Z? Almost all. Yeah, all, oh yeah. Okay, so we see no generational difference. Everyone says there are prejudices in the labor market. And that's actually true. That's also what we found. And the employers say that as well as employees, and for young and for old. And we asked in our barometer, you know, what associations to have employers with elderly employees. And in gray, you see some positive associations, in brown, a negative one. So there are quite a few positive ones with elderly, good handling of unforeseen situations, well-maintained networks, high social competence, high willingness to take responsibility, but then, of course, high costs also always comes. And interestingly, compared to the survey we did 2019, 4 years earlier, the negative associations with younger ones have increased. So that's an observation we did, and that's also why I'm showing here a few more ones. There are more on both sides, of course. But so Positive side with young ones comes good handling of IT, communication, etc., high willingness to learn, flexibility to learn, etc., high inventiveness, but at the same time also things like resignation when they are no longer supported, above average illnesses or absence due to illnesses, and younger employees can be expected to do less. But to put that in relation, or I think we always already did a bit blame the youth so far. I show you a quote from Socrates 400 years before Christ. So he already said the youth loves luxury, they have had manners, they despise authority, they have no respect for older people, and they chatter when they should be working. So yes. So we have to see that relative. So just to summarize, what can we do also as companies to increase this knowledge transfer between generations and the collaboration? I think the absolute key is prejudice-free environment and a good corporate culture. Without that, it doesn't work. It's also focusing on intergenerational aspects, actually on generational connecting values. We know there are values which are for all generations or for all ages important, such as, for example, trust-based relationship between employees and their managers, or respectful interaction, or direct open communication. So these are topics where you can kind of get all into the same boat. And then, of course, there are also structures. We learned that no one is really keen on structural measurements, but they are important as well. So reverse mentorings are one option, mixed age teams, or then also informal options such as lunch lottery, where you don't have to do much, you just bring two persons of different ages together for lunch, and that's it for an informal exchange. And actually also research just recently published by MIT Age Lab also really, they looked at different diversity and inclusion measures for age, how they perform, and they also found that kind of focusing on intergenerational common aspects is the one which helps most. So here you see a picture of me earlier. No, just kidding. We have the thesis that actually the young ones, that they are more dissatisfied with work situation than elderly people. And it's true, we also found that actually in our results and also looking at other studies. And here I show you some of the topics where we really found a highly significant difference, that youngers are less satisfied with these topics than elderly ones. And two, I would like to point out the flexibility. So flexibility really is a topic, and think about the caregiving, etc. I also came up, I think it's not only a wish of young ones. And then also the whole topic of career development, training, career opportunities, that's also an area where they are really less happy than the elderly ones. And funnily, the employers, they think they are most attractive for the young ones. That's what we see here. So employers had to do a self-assessment for different groups of employees where they think they were attractive or less attractive, and on top are really the young ones plus males. And yeah, you see it, but what increased is actually really the attractivity for elderly people that used to be lower relatively, but for example, lowest is persons in pension age. And that's something, if we think about the demographics I just showed you, we have to think about, right? So with this, I would like to close actually with this topic of flexibility, because it's not only a value or an aspect which is important for the younger generations where they're dissatisfied, it's also really important for the older individuals who want to work longer than just until retirement. We found that when we asked them, what's the most important condition for you to work after retirement age? Always flexibility. So with that intergenerational aspect, bringing the generations together, I would like to finish and thank you for your attention. Oh, sorry, one more note. Actually, my colleagues, they do a wonderful congress this November. So for anyone who's interested, just a little hint, financial demography. It's going to take place in Basel. Financial demography is kind of a new word. It brings together demography and finances. What means changing demography for financial markets? What does it mean for client base? What does it mean for labor markets? And yeah, just wanted to let you know about this event. So we leave that out. Actually, now the Q&A should come. Yeah. So I'm ready for questions. Yeah.
Go on.
Thanks for that. Sorry, Christian Zelius from Pori. The higher dissatisfaction in your research of younger generations in the workplace, is that a thing that has always existed, or is that something that you believe is new to newer generations as we have them now in the workforce?
Although I think it's a very good question, because it's also a question about generations versus life phase. Because often you can also be in a life phase where early on a job where you have different needs, right? And maybe you're more dissatisfied. What I can say just from our barometer, and that's where I'm arguing, in 2019 it was less pronounced, and now it was more pronounced.
Thank you.
Are the different generations responding differently when we look at things like change or innovation? Do you have some information on that?
Change or innovation on that? I don't have anything specifically. I mean, what we see that they really differ in some values, main values which they have. Maybe I can quickly go on that actually to show you that, which is the slide on the left-hand side. Wherever you see on the right-hand side a plus or a minus, it means, and with 3 stars, it means significantly more important for young, if it's a minus, and if it's a plus for older ones. And you see there are some aspects where there are really differences in these values. And I mean, it's not innovation, but neues lernen, for example, to learn new things, right? Young are definitely more open to that. But that, again, is also kind of a thing of your life phases, because you're still packing your backpack and you want to learn things. So it's always difficult to then really pin the reason down.
I wonder how managers can best address the difficulties between the different generations. So if conflicts come up, what is their role that you see?
Yeah, that's actually linked to our next project about which we're trying to set up now, about leadership. How actually does leadership change, and also how do you manage teams with this aging workforce and age diverse teams, and also with new ages, with new values and ideas actually coming now in higher ages in the workforce, because the workforce itself is aging in Switzerland. It aged quite a bit over the last 30 years, like from 39 years on average. Now the average is 42 years of the Swiss workforce over all sectors. So that one is aging as well. And I think it's really, culture is very, very important, like in many diversity topics. Addressing things, openly addressing things, direct communication, but then also use these instruments like building age mixed teams, like doing generational mentorings, etc. I think you broadly kind of implement that is important. And of course that also the management team actually lives it and not only tells the staff to do it. I think that's also very important that that's visible. And often still, for example, in boards in Swiss companies, I mean, they are very age homogeneous, and there also, it would be, in my view, ideal if a bit fresh ideas come in.
having just come off the voting of the second pillar of the Social Security here in Switzerland, what influence do you think politics and government policy has on helping change the workforce? Or do you think it's more on the corporations to kind of help that change, to encourage people of older age to want to continue working longer, right? Because at the moment, it's almost like you're forced to retire, otherwise there's kind of like a penalty, right? So kind of which comes first, or what do you think about that?
That's a good question. I think it needs everything. It needs actually the surrounding to change. So the state, kind of the idea, what I try to say with, the perception of elderly in general, I think that hasn't arrived yet. Also in our society, maybe not so much. And then if that happens, then also, of course, companies can change. And but I think really first the framework also has to change to give just that more flexibility and that it's attractive to work in retirement age. In Japan, for example, like 50% of the ones just above 65, they work, and it's completely different. So I think we're also going to go in that direction. But knowing Switzerland, I also think it's going to take time.
Thank you, Anina. Let's quickly change over to a question that we received on Slido from our virtual audience. And then I think we have to quickly move on to start the panel. But maybe the last question, can you give an example of conflicting values between generations causing an issue, and then how that issue should be resolved?
Let me think of, values. It's not maybe values, but for example, the topic of Altersvorsorge, pension, right? We know for elderly that's much more an important topic, really significantly than for younger ones. And but as we've seen, I mean, we can kind of understand it because we saw this age dependency ratio, how it's going to rise, and what comes for the young to what burden actually they have to carry, and to overcome it. I think an open discussion has really to start, and also the young voices need to be heard because we have just so many more elderly people also just democratically overweighting the younger ones. So there needs to be a dialogue.
Thank you, Anina. And now over to you, Dana.
Thank you, Anina.
Thank you.
And then,
Thank you.
Well, you see what a bit of research can spark. Lots of questions and not always all the answers, I think. I would like to welcome the panel on stage now as well, because we will continue with the panel discussion to go a bit deeper on some of these topics. Thank you. So I'll start at the far end. Natalie Alves from Renaissance Re. Welcome. We'll introduce one of them every time. They can then share their job and a little bit more, maybe if you want to declare also which generation you feel part of, voluntarily, of course. Secondly, we have there Armin Satzker, a colleague of mine in Swiss Re. So welcome as well. Then we have Marcus Hefel, from Liberty Mutual. Welcome, and we'll talk also a little bit later on your role in Switzerland. We have here Christian Siles from Sompo, and then lastly but not least, Constance Weinbrenner from CHOP. So we'll go through a number of questions with the panel. They will be able to share a bit their insights, their experience, and maybe just a little, I would say, warm-up question, because it's probably easiest to start with a simple question. We've heard a lot about generations at work, and now today it's a diving festival for the insurance industry. So let's look at our own industry. How do you think we're doing with regards to age diversity and inclusion? And maybe I can ask you, Christian, first. Maybe share first your role, and if you voluntarily want to declare which generation you feel part of as well.
Happy to. Thanks for having me here today. Generation X, sort of, probably just on the edge of becoming a millennial, born 79. I work at Sompo on the underwriting side, look after marine energy and aviation reinsurance, and I've been in various roles in the industry in the last 20 years. So I've always been in insurance, reinsurance my whole career. And as such, I think it has gotten a lot better, as in, like, how does the insurance industry address the generational question? When I started out, it wasn't certainly where it is today, or I feel it is today. Obviously, it may not be my position to say how the younger or the older generation of me feel about that, but looking back 20 years, it was you join the workforce and you move along, and you do your job. I think the awareness of how generational questions need to be addressed going forward has really only come over the last 15, 10 years, what have you. And it's interesting because, of course, it should be at the core of what we do as an insurance business, right? We are talking about a promise to pay in the future, and sort of and handling generational questions for a long time. So almost odd that our own workforce questions only comes up now in the last couple of years. So yeah, my view, it has gotten a lot better here.
That's good to hear, but it sounds like there's still a bit of work to do.
There's still a bit of work to do indeed, yeah.
All right, thank you. Constance, what's your view on where we are today?
Hi, everyone. Thanks also for having me. I work at Shop as a business development manager in consumer lines. And yeah, I have not been that long in the workforce. I work since 5 years now in the insurance industry, and it's an industry that I perceive as still quite traditional compared to, for example, the tech industry or other industries. And yeah, I think the industry is really catching up. I mean, events like this today, that's, I think, a really great starting point. And also for me, I really didn't have that topic that much on the agenda. I have to really be honest, before I started working. And now I think that's really a great start. And I think the industry is really becoming to appreciate the benefit of multi-generational teams and a workforce. And yeah, I think trying to really see and appreciate that different generations can bring value to the table. So, for example, I think younger people in general, they really have fresh perspectives. They bring in a lot of technological skills and ideas, but also younger people, I think we need to appreciate the perspectives and the knowledge that older people have. So I think that's also something the younger people really have to work on and appreciate. Yeah.
So work in progress also from your side.
Yeah, definitely on both ends. Yeah.
Natalie, how do you see that?
So good afternoon. I'm really glad to be here and to talk about this important topic. I've been in the industry for 15 years now. I'm the head of claims. I've always worked in claims. And the fact that we are talking about it shows that it's a subject that deserves to be explored and where awareness raising is important. From my perspective, from my experience, it depends on the market, it depends on the industry, but also it depends on the company profile. I remember my early years of career. I started in France in insurance, and at that time I was surprised by the age difference. Most of my colleagues had spent more than 15 years in the same company. When I moved to other companies, it was a bit different. The gap was not so big. And this is because I think some of the companies were smaller. They were growing fast, and they were hiring different profiles, which made it more diversified. This being said, the hiring approach is constantly changing, evolving. And a few years ago, the driver was the transition, passing on knowledge. Nowadays, we also talk about balance, what each generation brings to the table. Because yes, each generation brings a different vision, a different way of thinking, and a different way of working, which makes the company stronger.
Thank you. Yeah, and it's recognizing that and making sure that we really bring that into our process. Now, we've heard from Anina's research, and you highlighted also the satisfaction and dissatisfaction that potentially could be there in different generations. We know with the changes in demography that we will be up for a bit of a talent shortage. And for us, it's going to be important that we keep people at work and engaged for a long time. So we know that if I call it like that, the older generation is supposed to be more engaged and satisfied. But we need to keep them that way because they need to stay with us for a bit longer. So the question is, how can we do that as employers? So Marcus, maybe you want to start from your perspective. What can we do?
Yes. Good evening, everybody. I'm definitely a very happy person. So that's definitely the case. So I just realized a couple of days ago that I'm part of the baby boomers because I had a discussion with my daughter, which is 15, about Instagram, and she told me, listen, Papa, you are too old, you do not understand Instagram. So what does it mean? Yeah, I believe experience is something which is unpayable. So we heard before that the older generation is too expensive. That's probably fact. But on the other hand, I strongly believe we should also stop to speak about expenses in respect of elder peoples because it is experience. And the elder generation, they have a huge experience. And that's something which is really valuable for each and every company. And what makes me a little bit nervous, not for myself, but in general, that many companies in Switzerland or also in other countries, and they went through restructuring processes. And what's happened normally, the elder generation, they were obliged to leave the company, which is, in my opinion, really dangerous because such a company is immediately losing the experience of this generation. So for me, and you already mentioned that the society and the companies, in my opinion, are definitely not prepared to solve the issue. And I really hope that we will find ways that the elder generation, which still have, and I'm happy to hear that I still have more than 20 years. So my question is really, what shall I do when I have to go to retirement if I cannot work anymore? Of course, I have a lot of hobbies, but nevertheless, it is important that the elder generation does also have the possibility to do a valuable job and to work somewhere.
Yeah. Christian, how do we engage that group?
Yeah, and it's. I think we heard a lot of already initiatives there from Anina in the presentation, like maintaining flexibility basically on both sides of the generational side, right? The older and the younger generation. I think flexibility is a key word here, allowing older generations to work more flexibly, being they take a couple of years, come back, or they work part-time or they work more flexibly on different time schedules. All that should help, as it does help already, I guess, with younger generations, right? These modern work forms of modern work really are there to stay. They're not going to go away. I think we all appreciate that and like that post-COVID. And we had a bit of a conversation over lunch about that. And I really think that this would also not only help the current workforce, but the workforce that is about to retire going forward to maintain a presence in the workforce overall. I guess in the past we can always cite examples where we had that colleagues retired, came back after a couple of years because they realized they missed working so much.
And it's interesting that you say that some of the mechanisms or policies we put in place for the younger generation with regards to childcare leave or maybe study leave, that we now actually look to apply them to older generations. And that's maybe how it's supposed to be, that we don't focus on one, but we make it accessible to all. Constance, from your perspective, how do we engage the other generations?
Yeah, I mean, I'm starting from different generation, right, from different age group, but what I can see is when I'm looking at my future and when I'm thinking about when I'm still part, or when I will be part of the older workforce, I think today we are just focusing so much on increasing efficiency, optimization, transforming, making everything digital, and trying to remove sometimes really the human part and human interaction, trying to be very efficient, not making any mistakes, and becoming not really then, sorry, now I lost my point. So really engage older people and have their have a knowledge transfer and just don't only focus on transformation and efficiency improvement, etc., but work with both components and provide job security also for younger generations, even though there is a shortage of workforce with what we saw in the research. But I mean, with AI and technology, these are things that I'm, as a younger workforce member, already thinking about. And when I think about my future, that's really a scary thought. And I think we should involve all the workforce and all the age groups into that thought.
Yeah, it's interesting.
Hope that makes sense.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's interesting that you say that you, as a, if I can say like that, the younger generation already have your concerns about your future and your job security. And that's what we saw in the research as well, that the younger generation has concerns about me, and even maybe has less satisfied at work, has other considerations. What do we need to do as an employer to engage you and make sure that we secure you as a talent that we need for our organization?
I'm going to drop a key word, and that's purpose. So I think I'm one of the people that I thrive when I have a purpose and when I really can see what benefit I'm bringing every day with my work and with all the time I spent at the company I'm working for, and that I have projects that I like to engage and see good results. And I think, especially with the shortage of future workforce, I think it should be a focus for companies to try and really include the younger workforce, not only in lower level jobs or in entry jobs, but also really involve them in important decision-making processes and really to show them how does the business work, how do we cope with changes, with challenges, and how do we bring in innovation and let them be part of that process and not just have that the older generation with, of course, more experience do, but really foster collaboration there and include the younger generations. And that's, for example, something that I, as an employee, would really really appreciate.
Yeah. Nice to hear. Armin, we haven't heard from you yet. How do you see that?
Hi everyone, great to be here. So I actually work here at Swiss Re, work in market risk management. And I believe I might be the youngest person kind of on this panel. So I guess I'm narrowly Generation Z, having been born in 1996. I think there's, I think that might actually be some overlap between sort of, what the younger kind of colleagues might be looking for and what some of the older colleagues might be looking for, going back to what Christian mentioned in terms of some of this flexibility. So I believe that, flexibility in terms of kind of working hours and maybe also, remote work, kind of working from home, maybe, a day or two a week, is something many of us really appreciate and I have been appreciating quite a lot since the COVID pandemic in particular, and sort of seeing that's sort of a concept that also works in practice. And by the way, very glad we can do this here at Swiss Re. But there's also, I think there's also a bunch of other things that are quite valued by younger employees. So I think one thing is sort of that, when employers try to stay up to date with regards to technologies that can make one's work life easier, I think that's something that's quite generally appreciated. And then I think, especially in sort of like an industry like the insurance industry, where maybe we see sort of an industry with maybe slower growth than some other industries. I think sort of some traditional values and some, like career opportunities are still, very, very cherished by at least some members of that generation. So I think some of these traditional values are still very much appreciated by the younger generation and are something that they also value when provided by employers, I think.
Thank you. Yes, and I think this goes a little bit into the direction that Anina touched on the prejudice, because we all make assumptions about what each of these generations want, do, value, etc. But those prejudices also hold us back because we make assumptions that might not be there. So Natalie, are you able to speak a little bit about, what do we do to reduce these prejudices? How can we handle that?
Being the youngest in a department broke me a lot. The first thing is that I bonded with people that I think it was not even possible. The second thing is that I learned a lot because we had a good team spirit and we had a good atmosphere. Things that I couldn't even learn in books, such the market habits, for instance. So for me, it's really important to not put tags in people, and that's what I do today. I try to not create a narrative that would put up walls between us. And I focus on the person, what they like, what they dislike, who they are, what's their experience. And I think it's also really important to have a positive approach, to be open to discussions, to listen, to be kind, to be fair, to respect, and to also promote people internally. I can give you an example. So one of my tasks as a manager is to hire people. I had an open position in my team, and so I interviewed different candidates. Age was not a problem, so candidates from different generations. And I focused on what they could offer to the company, what they were looking for, and what also I could provide. But the most relevant question was, can we make a good team together? Can it work? Some people expected me to hire someone that was younger than me, but it turns out that I hired someone that has more than 20 years experience in the market. She comes from another field, so I think we are complementary. She learns from me, I learn from her, and it works. It does work well.
So important to look at the individual and what they can bring to the team. Thank you, Marcus.
Yeah, I believe it is extremely important to have a healthy mix between generations, and it is in the responsibility of the companies, but also in the responsibility of the management to build up such a structure, because everybody can learn from the other, and that's the most important part in my view. I do not believe that the company can survive without to have a healthy mix. So you need in a company the experience, but you need also the younger ones which have innovation, which are much more able to understand technology, etc. So I personally, I'm an IT user, but I have no clue about IT. So I'm always happy when I can ask somebody within my team to explain me when I have an IT problem. And that's also something which has a positive impact on the expenses, because when I have a nice mix and I can go back to younger people to ask them to support me on such a stupid issue, then it's saving cost, because I don't have to ask the helpline and I have to wait 1 hour until I'm receiving a response. So I believe that's also a positive impact. On the other hand, what is also important is that the older peoples do not tend to ask stupid work to do by the younger ones. And sometimes, and I made the experience in other companies, that sometimes that's a little bit something which the older people tends to do. So this should not happen. But that's also in the responsibility of the management and of the company to build up such a structure where it is possible that everybody can really learn from the others. So let's say experience or other things.
Yeah. And this knowledge transfer piece came up earlier as well in the research, and it doesn't always work that well, so that's a bit of a challenge. And the question is, Natalie, what can we do to make sure that that flows better, that exchange?
This is one of the key questions for me, and transfer knowledge is easier said than done. So first of all, I think we are all human beings, and we are here to connect. It's one of our needs. We want to be seen, we want to be valued, and for this to happen, we have to create bonds and we have to create trust. So one of the first things that the company should do is create a healthy and pleasant place, environment, where people feel safe, understood, valued, and can speak up, because this will create the team spirit. I recommend, one of the things that I see is that we have to push or encourage, we have to encourage employees to interact. And to do so, we have to create opportunities for people to connect in person, to meet in person. And it's even more relevant for new joiners that don't have the network yet. Once the bond is there, everything becomes easier. You can work from everywhere and you can connect with anyone because you know them. The bond is there. I also believe that we will never replace totally the real interactions with the virtual ones, because we connect through energies, we connect through verbal and body language, and also with styles. And for me, it's really important that the bond is there. And I lost my track, sorry. And I'm sorry.
Well, the bonds, I think, that you mentioned for the knowledge transfer will be a helpful element. And
yeah, just to keep going, sorry. So this is one of the parts. The second part is also that we as manager, we can facilitate the connection. We can facilitate the connection. We can encourage ideas to flow. We can also help with feedback and with brainstorming. And another aspect that, because all of that is good, it can boost the progress, but the company can do even better in providing a more structured way of transferring the knowledge. And I have 3 examples. One is mentorship. I learned with my mentors things that I said were not in books. The second thing is presentation and lunch and learns, because it's more fun. And because also it's accessible to all this young generation and that also have things to say. And the third thing is talent development programs or development programs in general.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Armin, what have you seen that individuals can do to help this knowledge transfer?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think Natalie makes a very good point on sort of the relationships. So I think that's really sort of the first building block, like getting into the habit of naturally kind of building relationships with your co-workers, colleagues, because I think that encourages sort of the flow of information. Like you, first you need to find out kind of what knowledge there is that you can learn, that you can acquire, I think. So, and then it's really sort of partially everyone's responsibility, I think, to facilitate and kind of encourage this knowledge transfer. So I think the person who already has that knowledge, maybe from sort of a generation's perspective, the more senior, more experienced person, that person, I think, shouldn't hold back and should openly kind of display or kind of share their areas of knowledge, so that people can find out that, you know, maybe there is something to be learned there. And then sort of the other person, so maybe the younger, the more junior person in that kind of co-worker relationship, I think should very much feel that sense of responsibility of needing to, putting in some effort, being proactive in terms of first finding out maybe, you know, how can I also support maybe my employer in a way, trying to be commercial in that sense. And then sort of be proactive in putting in an effort and trying to actually make those learnings, actively ask about open topics, things they don't know as much about as of yet. So I think it's really kind of everyone's involved in that sort of knowledge sharing relationship, and everyone has some responsibility, I think, to facilitate that.
Yeah, for sure. And yesterday we had a conversation about this same topic here at Swiss Re, and the topic of feedback came up. How do you see the differences in giving and receiving feedback between the generations?
Absolutely. Maybe it's only partially sort of like a generational topic, but I think there's certainly some things that I think maybe especially also younger kind of employees appreciate. So obviously when you're kind of, you know, more inexperienced maybe in your career, I think something that I typically quite appreciate is being told things that I can improve on, because you don't want to spend 20 years in your career and you know, stop learning after 2. I think that's a very dull career and maybe also not the most successful one. So I think sort of this constructive feedback is quite important. I think personally also because you put in a lot of effort into maybe sort of, you know, performance reviews and giving feedback, receiving feedback. I think something that's also quite appreciated by many people and maybe, you know, even more so the younger generation is when there's actually kind of some consequences, some things that follow as a result of some feedback. So if you, for example, you continuously receive good feedback, then maybe there should be some reward for that at the end of the day. So you don't want the feedback to just land somewhere in the cupboard and no one's going to look at it in the years to come. So any sort of tangible consequence of the feedback, I think, is something that's quite highly valued.
Interesting. That's very interesting. Marcus, from your perspective, how do you see that?
When I started in the insurance industry, feedback or performance discussion didn't exist. So today, our industry is high performing in this area. Mm-hmm. So that's mean every company does have the feedback discussions on a regular basis, the performance discussions, which I personally believe is extremely important. But on the other hand, I believe it is also tricky when I have to discuss with a 63-year-old person about the future life or about the career, without to have the possibility to discuss with him what could we do when he has 65. Does the company have a space to give him a work or not? On the other hand, it is also difficult when I have discussion with somebody which wants to do a career, and it is not possible because the company is not able to push this person for one or the other reason. And it is also tricky to have the discussions with people which do not really want to do a career, which just want to have their job, come in the morning and go in the evening. So I believe it is important to have this possibility to discuss feedback and performance, but it is also important to have more flexibility so that we really can have processes where it is possible to go more in the details with each and every individual and then really push what this person wants to do and not just say, okay, we have to do this because it is within the company philosophy. But if we really have to do it, then we need also to go a step further and have an action plan and then push really the people in the right direction. Otherwise, it is, in my opinion, nonsense. Sorry for that.
No, you're welcome. Thank you very much for sharing your insights. And what strikes me is that we talk about these groups and we put everyone under the same sort of labels or expectations, and you hear that actually you want some consequences and some follow-up after feedback, and you say the same. So actually it goes across all the generations. So thanks very much for sharing all your experiences and all your insights. And thank you, Anina, for also sharing the results of your study and the barometers, of course. To the audience here and online, really appreciate that you've taken the time to engage in this conversation. It's an important one. It will remain an important one because we haven't totally solved everything. But your involvement, it helps us to build the topic further and make sure that we can shape a more sustainable and inclusive future for all generations. So thank you very much. I would like to invite you to join us in the foyer for an apéro, and thank everyone online as well. Thank you.